We begin this program in New Zealand, where 40 people have been confirmed killed and more than 20 wounded after shootings at two mosques in the city of Christchurch, that's on the country's South Island. The first attack happened at the Al Noor Mosque, the second at the Linwood Mosque. Eyewitnesses describe people fleeing in terror during Friday prayers. 3 men and a woman have been apprehended. Police say they've defused a number of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, found after the attacks. Authorities have warned people to avoid mosques across the country and for those mosques to keep their doors closed. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said it was one of New Zealand's darkest days. This is what she had to say at a press conference just moments ago.
It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. From what we know, it does appear to have been well planned. 2 explosive devices attached to suspects' vehicles have now been found and they have been disarmed. There are currently 4 individuals who have been apprehended, but 3 are connected to this attack who are currently in custody.
Let's go live now to DW's Samantha Early joining us in Christchurch. Samantha, we heard the Prime Minister there calling this an act of terrorism. What else did she have to say in her press conference?
That's right. She did call it unequivocally an act of terrorism, and she emphasised a lot that New Zealand was chosen because it is a place where diversity and inclusiveness and all those sorts of values are strong. She was very keen to repeat that. She said this is not an enclave for that kind of ideology. By that she means, ideology of white supremacy, of wanting to inflict injury on certain groups of people. She was very, very keen to express that. New Zealand was targeted not because this sort of ideology is supported here, but because it's not.
Is the police operation still ongoing? Are suspects still at large? We already have 3 men in custody and a woman as well. What do we know about them and their possible motives?
Well, the one we know about the most is it's been confirmed there is a 28-year-old Australian man as the, I suppose, main suspect, and the others are also have been apprehended, but we don't know too much more about them at this stage. And they also cannot rule out that there might be more people involved in this, and that's why the police are still urging caution.
Okay, Christchurch was on lockdown. Is that lockdown been lifted? Or schools, for example, were told to shut their doors?
That's right. Yeah, that lockdown has been gradually being lifted over the past couple of hours. School children have been able to be picked up from school, as well as the hospital lockdown has stopped in a lot of public buildings as well. People are slowly being able to make their way home, but authorities are encouraging people to just stay home and not travel if they don't need to. So the feeling in the city is still definitely very tense, and there's a lot of concern there.
Okay, let's hear now from 2 eyewitnesses who were at one of the mosques during that shooting.
And he have helmet, and he have given the glasses, and he's a dress of the military, and he's a gun, machine gun of the M16 Plug 1, and it's a seat belt of the another gun, bullet, and he passed and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And not talk me. He looking and not talk me. He is starting shooting, and the people of the changing the shoes and the shooting, and me, I'm running. That's after that he go the inside and he go one by one, everybody killing, and some people died.
First we hide behind the cars and under the cars, and then when we see the firing still on, we try to jump the fence, and then we hide the next house to the mosque on this side. And fighting was on and on,
Samantha, 40 people have been confirmed killed. More than 20 have been injured. We understand police are using all their resources to get officers out onto the streets. How about emergency services? How are they coping in Christchurch right now?
There's been a lot of praise from the Mayor of Christchurch and from the citizens of Christchurch as to how the emergency services have coped. You'll have to remember the police were also looking out for the climate march, which was happening in Cathedral Square in the city, quite nearby, while this all started unfolding. So a huge police response all over Christchurch, and the mayor especially commending officers for their bravery there. You'll also know that Christchurch had a significant earthquake 8 years ago, so these response systems are quite well practiced, I guess, but it's also another trauma for the residents.
But what can you tell us about Christchurch's Muslim community? Have they been the subject of attacks before today?
Nothing like this. Nothing at all like this. And lots of people are very shocked that Muslims would be targeted here in New Zealand. There have been reports of racist attacks, but nothing on this scale, and certainly it's very shocking. The Muslim population here in New Zealand is roughly just over 1% of the total population, so it's not a very large community, but it is quite a diverse community. And from the latest census data, you see that about a quarter of people who listed themselves as Muslim in New Zealand were born here in New Zealand, and the other 3/4 from the Pacific Islands, Asia, Middle East and Africa. So a really diverse community, a small community, and one that the rest of New Zealand is really wanting to show solidarity with at the moment.
Okay, police are getting all their resources out onto the streets right now. How long will this ongoing police operation last? Is it centered in Christchurch, or is it also taking place in other urban centers across the country?
It is, really a nationwide operation. So the Prime Minister has said our alert level for terrorism has been raised from low to high, and that is to enable absolutely all those resources to be used throughout the country as they're needed. So they've really stepped things up to the highest level I think that they can, and we'll definitely be seeing a strong police operation, I think, continue for quite some time. It's hard to tell. We have had reports of potentially some situations developing in the past few moments in other cities too. So we will keep a close eye on that.
Okay, other situations developing in other cities. Do we know anything else about that, or are details slowly coming in on that?
Details are slowly coming in, but it appears that the train station at Britomart, which is in Auckland, the most populous city up in the North Island, has been evacuated, and the police are responding to a situation there. But it's unclear what that situation is at this stage, or if it has anything to do with what's happened in Christchurch.
Okay, we'll find more about that in the hours ahead. For now, DW's Samantha Early in Christchurch. Thanks so very much.
You're welcome.
Where at least 49 people were killed overnight when a white gunman targeted Muslims at prayer. 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch were packed with people on the Muslim Sabbath when someone entered and just started shooting. New Zealand's Prime Minister calls it terrorism. 41 people were killed at the Al Noor Mosque, followed by 7 more at the Linwood Mosque. That's about 4 miles away. 1 other person died at a hospital. A gunman appeared to live stream the first attack on Facebook. He showed his face at the beginning of the video.
Police have arrested an Australian man, Brenton Tarrant, and charged him with murder. 3 other people with possible connections to the attack were also arrested. Police found a vehicle carrying homemade bombs near the scene. Someone claiming to be the gunman posted a document online calling immigrants invaders. He described himself as a 28-year-old white Australian. Emma Cropper, with our partners at New Zealand's News Hub, filed this report on the deadliest mass shooting in the country's history. Some of the video we are about to show you is disturbing, and we've been careful to limit what you see and hear and how much we are showing.
Hello, 48 wounded children and adults are currently inside the hospital. Behind me there are 12 operating theatres in use working on those who urgently need help. Our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has called this New Zealand's darkest day. She said this was fuelled by hate. We warn you some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. Police and first responders descended on 2 mosques in Christchurch after reports a gunman stormed inside and opened fire on Muslims gathering for Friday prayers. People ran desperately from the gunfire, some with their hands in the air. The wounded were put on stretchers and rushed into emergency rooms.
It is clear that this is one of New Zealand's darkest days.
Suddenly, the shooting started.
A video apparently live-streamed by the gunman shows him driving to carry out one of the attacks. He can be seen briefly when he turns the camera on himself. He then parks his vehicle and opens his trunk where there are 2 assault rifles covered in white writing. He takes one out and as he approaches Al Nur Mosque, he opens fire at the entrance.
I could hear screaming and crying, and I saw some people were, drop dead.
The gunman spends around 2 minutes inside the mosque shooting before he exits and fires on people outside.
There was one guy changing his, the gun and taking the other one.
The gunman returns to his car to get his other rifle and then goes back to the mosque to continue shooting.
The blood is spitting on me, splashing on me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to happen to me now. But fortunately, I'm alive.
And I heard and saw what I thought were firecrackers, and I saw young fellas running down the street. And then all of a sudden it got quite violent, and I thought, no, that's not firecrackers. And they started falling, and one fell just to the left of my car and one fell to the right.
We have recovered a number of firearms from both of the scenes.
Not seen on video, a second attack at a different mosque around 4 miles away. It's unclear if it was carried out by the same man.
I'm 66 and never thought in my life I'd love to see something like this, not in New Zealand.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern called it an unprecedented act of violence and said it can only be described as a terrorist attack.
We were not chosen for this act of violence because we condone racism, because we're an enclave for extremism. We were chosen for the very fact that we are none of these things.
This attack is around 3 times more deadly than New Zealand's previous deadliest shooting, which was back in 1990. Police say it is still very much an ongoing situation because they can't be certain there aren't more attackers out there. Emma Cropper for CBS This Morning, Christchurch, New Zealand.
Some powerful and defiant words from the Prime Minister there.
And we begin with the breaking news from New Zealand in the horrific mosque shootings that left at least 50 people dead. That death toll rising tonight. The 28-year-old suspect accused in the killing spree, his face blurred by authorities, seen on camera there in a Christchurch courtroom, making a gesture while in handcuffs often used by white supremacists. Law enforcement searching his home, hunting for evidence. This as new stories of courage and heroism emerge, and why many are now calling this man a hero, as people in that nation express deep grief tonight, paying tribute to victims gunned down in 2 houses of worship. The Prime Minister vowing that following the tragedy, the country's gun laws will change. ABC's Will Carr is there leading us off tonight.
Tonight, harrowing new details about that hate-filled terror attack on 2 mosques in New Zealand. Abdul Aziz was praying with his 4 sons at the Linwood Mosque when he heard shots crack through the air. He quickly grabbed the first thing he could find, an electronic credit card machine.
I threw that FPOS machine on him. Then he got the gun out of his car and started shooting at me.
Aziz says when the suspect dropped one of his guns, he picked it up, but the gun was empty.
That shotgun I had in my hands, I threw like an arrow on him, and he busted his window. He just swear to me and just took off.
Many crediting Aziz tonight for possibly preventing more death and destruction. 36 minutes after getting the first call for help, local police arrested 28-year-old Brenton Tarrant, an Australian native. Authorities in raiding his home over 200 miles away using a bomb disposal robot. Tonight, he's behind bars after appearing in court. His handcuffs shackled to his waist. His face blurred under New Zealand law, but his hate on full display, appearing to flash this symbol often used by white supremacists in front of the judge.
You are Brenton Harrison Tarrant. Mr. Tarrant, you are remanded without plea.
Authorities call the suspect a self-proclaimed racist with a deep hatred for immigrants. He was heavily armed with 5 guns, including semi-automatics, a bulletproof vest, and left IEDs behind. Tarrant allegedly opened fire in the Al Noor Mosque during a packed prayer service, killing at least 41 men, women, and children in minutes, all while streaming the ghastly attack live online. Authorities say the killer then drove 3 miles to the Linwood Mosque, where the killing continued. At least 7 more worshippers were quickly slaughtered, and today 1 more dying in the hospital. Tonight, with burials underway, this community that is unaccustomed to any violence now mourning the loss of so many, including this 3-year-old boy.
You don't have many mass shootings in New Zealand at all.
Nothing at all that I can remember. Hold your loved ones close. Just tell them that you love them.
And Will Carr joins us now from outside that first mosque that was attacked. And Will, investigators actively searching that area right behind you?
That's right, Tom. Investigators are combing this area. They are going inch by inch, searching underneath cars and in grass, looking for shell casings. Also tonight, we're learning that authorities believe that the gunman targeted New Zealand because it's one of the safest countries in the world. And if he can pull it off here, he can pull it off anywhere. Tom.
Will Carr for us tonight. Will, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Now to the latest developments in New Zealand. It is clear the heartbreak and shock in Christchurch will take a long time to dissipate. The picturesque South Island city is still reeling after a massacre at 2 mosques more than 4 kilometers apart during Friday prayers. 49 people died, dozens more hurt, including children. It's after 3 a.m. on Sunday morning in Christchurch. These are pictures taken by our CBC News team on the ground. They show that despite the early hour, people continue to flock in the darkness to makeshift memorials to the victims whose identities in many cases are not yet known at this point. But those lives, nevertheless, are being celebrated. Adrienne Arsenault, co-host of The National, is part of our team on the ground in Christchurch. She filed this report on the numbing effect this tragedy has had on residents there.
If you were here, you'd be able to tell just by looking at them, by standing in the overwhelming perfume of them, that these flowers are incredibly fresh because this trauma is incredibly fresh. It is brand new to Christchurch, brand new to New Zealand. The messages that you see here are the echoes of what the politicians have been saying. Our home is your home always. They are us. This is a time where there still are not a lot of answers for the people here who desperately want them. Not all the bodies have been removed from the mosques. The Red Cross has a terrible, panicky list of the people who are considered missing. These are people from all over the world who came to call New Zealand home, whose loved ones fear that they might have been in that mosque, one of those 2 mosques, and may have been hunted, and they're still trying to identify them and find them. In the hospital here in Christchurch, there are 39 people still being treated. 11 of them are considered in big trouble. They're in intensive care at the moment. So there's a lot of anxiety here. The only person who's been charged with a crime here so far is an Australian man who appeared in court today. Interestingly, the images of him that were released by orders of the judge, his face was blurred. There is certainly no desire to give him any sort of spotlight or platform in this country, nor is there a desire to talk about studying gun crime here. The Prime Minister, who has been reaching out to people quite forcefully, has been saying, look, gun laws will change in this country, period. She is considering floating a ban on semi-automatic weapons. She's concerned that all of the weapons were purchased legally. Some of them may have been modified. She is looking at ways that that can possibly change. In the next few days, the Muslims in the city say they are desperate to get back to their mosques. They want and need a safe place to pray, especially right now. That's difficult. The police have not been able to release the mosques yet, and so some of the churches are saying, we know it's not the same, but the doors are open. Please come in, and we will be here with you while you pray. It's a gesture from strangers who, in this moment, just don't know what else to do.
As we learn more about what happened during those shootings in Christchurch, amazing stories of heroism are starting to emerge. People who risked everything to stop the attacker and those who made the ultimate sacrifice so that others could escape. Tasha Fatah joins us with more on that. Let's start with the man, the first to be identified, and his story.
That's right. So this is the story of Daud Nabi, 71 years old, originally from Afghanistan, and came to New Zealand in 1977 to get away from the ongoing war in his home country and build a better life in this brave new land. And so he does. He raises a family there. His children live there. He works and experiences a good, safe life. And even in his retirement is very active, very positive. He was the president of the local Afghan association in his community, active in the mosque. And it was at the mosque during Friday prayers, and Friday, of course, being the holy day for Muslims, that's when he gave his life in the service of his faith, because the gunman walked into the Al Noor Mosque, started shooting people, and what we understand from his family members and from witnesses is that Daud Nabi threw himself, a 71-year-old man, threw himself on another congregant to save that individual. But as a result of his heroism, he was shot fatally and lost his life. And you know, we've been talking about him quite a bit this morning, John, and can't emphasize this enough. When you flee a war-torn country, even if it is now more than 40 years ago, you don't anticipate something like this type of violence that unfortunately so dominant in other parts of the world, to find its way into your mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, of all places. But unfortunately, that's how he's lost his life. His son is upset. He went to the court when the suspect was being arraigned, was very angry, spoke to American media. His daughter took to Facebook and offered a softer tone to remember her father, and her note said, "My father gave his last breath to the people," and to the people meaning all of us, you know, to the congregants of the mosque. So an incredible life lived, and sadly, a life lost.
We are going to continue. There will be 48 more stories of people who lost their lives. We're also going to hear stories of heroism, people who lived but could well have died. What do you know about that?
So remember that this is the story of two mosques, and now our report is the story of two heroes. One sadly lost his life at Al Noor. Abdul Aziz at the Linwood Mosque, 48 years old, survived, and his story is just incredible, John. I don't know how many of us would be brave enough to do this. So the suspect at the guy, so he starts running, the suspect runs, gets into his car. As he's running, he's dropped one of his guns. Abdul Aziz picks it up, tries to shoot him. There's no bullets in it. Launches the weapon at the suspect's car, shatters his window. The suspect swears at him, drives away. Abdul Aziz is still chasing him down the street. Once he's out of sight from the car, he goes back to the mosque and tends to his loved ones and his fellow congregants and helps save them. Naturally, everyone is calling him a hero. He says, "No big deal. I think anybody would have done the same thing." But really, I mean, you don't need to watch like a superhero comic movie. You just need to watch an interview with this guy. It's unbelievable.
And who knows whether that smashed window was something that alerted police when they were pursuing the car later. That would be something you'd watch for if someone had been shooting out of a vehicle. Earlier, we were joined by Dion Swiggs. Now, he's a city councillor in Christchurch. Both mosques attacked were within his riding. We asked him how the community's coping.
The communities are telling us, you know, they're broken. They are devastated by this terrorist attack on our city. This is something that we don't expect to have happen in our city, and it has. And really, we are now sort of trying to work with our communities to sort of make, you know, sense of what's happened, but also support them through the grieving process. And it is really challenging.
How does this square with the image that the world has, and I would imagine folks there have, of New Zealand as being such an idyllic, peaceful place?
This is a real shame that this has happened, and the thing is that this person wasn't even from New Zealand. He came to New Zealand to do this attack, and he has done that to us in Christchurch, a city that is recovering from the earthquakes, and that makes it really difficult in its own right. But this is an unprecedented hate on our city, on our people, on the Muslim community of our city, who are our people. And the message I want to send to the world is that we are still a safe city, we are still a safe nation, and we will be fighting this hatred, because we will not let this define who we are.
In the hours following the attack, many of the survivors shared their horrific scenes that they witnessed and how they managed to escape, while others in the Muslim community say they cannot believe something like this could happen in this country, especially New Zealand. So here are some of their stories.
And he came through and he started shooting like everyone in the mosque, like, everywhere. And I have to smash the door, glass, from the window. And from the door, there is a small door, smash it, and to get everyone try to get out.
After 3-4 minutes, we heard, the firing, and it was from the main entrance of the building. And then everybody just ran to the back doors just to save themselves. And first we hide behind the cars and, under the cars, and then when we see the firing still on, we try to jump the fence.
I was jumping out of the wall, and then I stayed there in a house, and still we were listening the gunfire, a loud sound, which was continuously happening for 10 to 15 minutes.
I was thinking that he must run out of bullets, So what I did was basically waiting for that and praying to God, oh God, please, let this guy run out of bullets.
You don't think something like this could happen in New Zealand? Well, in Christchurch of all places, we're such a small community, we're so kind and loving, so I just don't understand why someone would hurt us like this and in such a way, just like an animal. Like, why would you treat us like that? We've done nothing wrong to you. And what terrifies me is that there's people out there that are enjoying this, or they're okay with this and they support this, and it pushes their cause even more, and I'm really scared for our future. I'm terrified. I don't know if I'm going to be feeling safe walking by myself wearing my headscarf, and I've never felt that way.
Joining me now is someone who survived the attack. Shoaib Ghani was at the Linwood Mosque. So remember, there were two mosques that came under fire. There was the Al Noor Mosque, and Shoaib was at Linwood. Now, he is currently under lockdown at his home in Christchurch, and a warning, some of the details he and I are about to discuss may be disturbing to some of you folks at home, so if you've got children in the room, maybe you want them to step out for just a few moments. Shoaib, first of all, I just want to say I'm so deeply sorry for what you've experienced, for what your communities are going through right now. As much as you're willing to share with us, please describe for me where you were when the shooting took place at your mosque.
Well, I was in the middle of my prayers. Was just the starting of the prayers when I heard gunshots from outside the mosque, but we did not break the prayer. We still continued to pray. But a brother standing near the window tried to look out the window and said, somebody's shooting. But we still did not break the prayer. But then the shooter came to the left side of, there's a window on the left, and started shooting from the window. And I saw people dying, falling on the floor with all bloods in their head, and everybody then knew that something is happening.
I just want to stop you 1 second, Shoaib. People standing next to you were shot and dropped down in front of you?
Yes, just beside me. Just beside me. I was in the prayer, and he's just dropped down. And then everybody realized that something bad is happening, because until we were hearing from outside, we did not break the prayers. But when he came in there from the window, started shooting, people started to fall down on my left, and I was like, and everybody then fell down to the ground, started to crawl, save themselves, and I could see people getting shot in head, in legs, body, shoulders. I could see my friends getting shot, and he could not do anything but to hide my face. I kept crawling towards the corner until I I could see people getting shot beside me. I was just waiting when the bullet will hit me, because it was gonna hit me, because it was hitting just by people are by my side. Why is it not gonna hit me? So I just kept crawling. I saw a table in front of me when the shooting was still on. People were crying and screaming. So I grabbed the table and went under it. And I was really horrified. I could see people, getting shot in the head. So I was really, I could not take that. So I closed my eyes and I put my head down and tried calling home, because I wanted to talk home for one last time, because I felt like I'm gonna die. So I tried calling home, but nobody picked up at my place.
And who was at home? Who was at home that you were trying to call?
Mother. My mother.
And is your mother in Christchurch?
No, she's in India.
And you weren't able to get through to her?
No, I could not. I tried to call my mother multiple times, nobody picked up. I called my father, nobody picked up. So I had no choice. I could look around, people asking for help me, and they were bleeding, but I could not reach out to them, because I thought that if I move out of the table, he might shoot me too. So I could just see them bleed to death. That's what I did. Eventually, I had no choice but to see them dying. They were reaching out, but I could not help them. So I tried calling the ambulance, and there was a lady on the other end of the phone. She asked me to stay on the line until the help arrived. So I stayed on line. I could still hear gunfights shouting, people getting hurt, women crying, screaming, getting shot, kids getting shot. And my head was down with the lady on the line saying, "Hang on, the help is coming." And I was just waiting if I get shot or the help arrives. I just have to wait until that. And I did not move, because if I would have moved or something, he might shoot me too. So I just kept my head down, and some guy standing on the window just screamed that police is here, because he was able to look out of the window.
And
so
Shoaib, in situations, but in situations like this, it's difficult to measure time, but just as best as you can, between the moment that you heard some activity outside the window of the mosque and by the time the police arrived and the shooting stopped, how long do you think that time frame was?
10 minutes.
It was 10 minutes of shooting?
Yeah, no, it's not 10 minutes of shooting. The shooter ran away, a couple of minutes silence, and then the police came.
And did the shooter say anything as he was carrying out this attack?
No, nothing at all. A brother from mosque said to me that he saw the shooter. He was wearing a mask and he had a gun. It was written "Welcome to Hell" on his gun. That's what he said to me. That's what he saw.
And what was going through your head in this moment?
You always think of these moments as how heroic you can act when these things come, but nothing, you can't do anything at all. You just can see people dying in front of you and you try to save yourself. I could see people getting shot and had brains out, and I just can't do anything. You just don't know what to do but to save yourself, and you don't even know how to save yourself. So I just went under a table. I was lucky enough to find a table. I just went under it and kept my head down, and I kept my phone on with the lady on the phone. And somebody shot. And after a few minutes, a lady shouted that police is here. The guy shouted that the police is here, and that was a relief. But then police came in, fired multiple shots. Probably that was police. I thought they saw the gunman running and they shot him, or they tried to chase him or whatever. And then the SWAT came in with all their guns, tried to survey the whole mosque, asked us to put our hands up on the head, stand up, checked us. That is the moment when I stood up and see what is exactly happening in the mosque. I could see the carpets going red with blood, with multiple dead bodies. The police have put clothes on those bodies. I could see them. I could see multiple dead bodies, and then eventually they put clothes on those dead bodies, and there were like 5 or 6. I saw it in my 5 or 6 people lying dead on the floor. There were more though, and a lot of people. One of my friends got hurt, got shot in his shoulder. He was in hospital, and one of my friends got shot in the back of the head. He's no more. He died on spot. So that was really horrific. The police came, they rescued us. They walked us through the mosque towards a dairy across the road, and we stayed in the dairy for 30 minutes. And I saw people crying for their husbands or their kids. They could not find them, or they are left in the mosque. They are hurt. They cannot move. The police was doing everything they can to tell them that they're safe or anything. But we all knew what happened, so everybody had an idea that if they are not here, then where they are, they must be really bad, hurt or dead. So
Shoaib,
eventually they took her.
how are you feeling now? It's still a day. It's
horrific.
just
I cannot
been a
sleep
day.
or eat. Yeah.
You can't sleep or eat.
I don't. No, I can. No. I just can hear gunshots. I tried to sleep last night, but I could not. I just stayed up all night. I just stayed up all night and just waited. I could not do anything but to call home. My father wants me to sleep because it's important, but I cannot. I just cannot explain you how I feel right now. I could still hear gunshots. I could still feel me lying on the floor, waiting for the bullet to hit me. But it did not, luckily. I kept checking my body, like where am I hurt.
How long have you been living in New Zealand and in Christchurch?
I arrived in July 2018. I'm a construction management student. And it's not even a year since I'm in Christchurch. I chose Christchurch because it's so peaceful. Never heard anything in New Zealand. Never saw this coming. I never thought this would happen in Christchurch. That too, because Muslims are so minority in Christchurch. So I never thought that if anyone were attacked, why would it be Christchurch? It's so less people.
Okay.
But things happens.
Shoaib, I have so much more I want to ask you, but we are running out of time. So I guess two things I really want to know is, how are you going to move forward? Do you want to stay in Christchurch? And also, when you finally did get through to your mom, what did you say to her?
My mom was crying. I just remember she was crying and she asked me, did I get shot multiple times? I said, no, I'm alive and I'm safe. I just want to go home now. Maybe I'll just visit home once and I'll come back to Christchurch. It's just few people, I cannot just blame whole New Zealand for this. They are the only one who rescued us. So it's just some guy who tried to shoot us. I cannot just leave New Zealand for not being safe.
So you're going to stay?
I hope. Yeah, seems like it. It's a good country. Everybody's so peaceful. People helped me here. Just one guy tried to kill me doesn't mean everybody is bad, So I can come back here and live with hope that nothing happens in the future.
Okay.
That's all I could do. Mosques are closed, so.
Listen, Shoaib, let's leave it on that wonderful sentiment of hope. I am so deeply sorry for what you've gone through. I'm so sorry that you've lost friends. And I know that everyone, every decent human being on this planet shares their support and love and sympathies with what your communities have gone through. So thank you for making time for us. I hope that things get better soon. I hope you get some sleep as well. So thanks for making time for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Cheers.
Shoaib Ghani is a survivor of the Linwood Mosque shooting. He joined me from Christchurch, New Zealand.
Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has been meeting people in hospital who were injured in the terror attacks at mosques in Christchurch on Friday. Brenton Tarrant, an Australian national who's 28, has appeared in court charged with 1 count of murder, though further charges are expected to follow. These are live pictures from Christchurch. As you can see, people have been laying flowers near the mosques with messages of support for the victims and their families. My colleague Sharanjit Lail is in Christchurch for us.
That's right, Celia. I'm just here at the Law Courts where earlier today Brenton Tarrant appeared on the dock in white. And of course, he's going to be held until April the 5th when he will be appearing again. He's been charged on 1 sentence, 1 count so far. But of course, many others are to come because we know 49 people have been confirmed to have been killed at those mosque attacks just yesterday. And many others are injured in the hospital in intensive care as well. Now, of course, there's been a great sense of solidarity amongst people here in Christchurch. I've been speaking to a lot of them. There's a sense of resilience that they will bounce back from this. But of course, many people still remain in shock. And I went to visit a memorial in the centre of town just a little earlier.
A memorial for the victims of the shooting. Christchurch residents have been bringing flowers and leaving notes here all day. The messages are clear. New Zealand may be struggling to comprehend the tragic events that took place in Christchurch, but people were determined to come together to pay their respects.
Yeah, my friend have a short on leg actually. Yeah, I tried to ring him yesterday, but I couldn't get to him.
Memorials like this one have been springing up all over the city. People have been coming here to the Botanical Gardens in Christchurch all day, leaving their messages and flowers. There's a real sense of shock and horror at how something so awful could strike the heart of this community.
We're very laid back. I think we're too laid back.
Yeah.
And the world has got a bit small now.
Yeah.
And we need to kind of secure things for our ones that are precious to us, like these lives that have been lost. It's all in vain, really.
New Zealand's Prime Minister has praised the efforts police have made, but has called for a review of the country's gun laws after it was revealed that the suspect legally obtained his weapon. She has also met with community leaders.
New Zealand is united in its grief, and we are united in our grief. And so I convey that message of love and support on behalf of New Zealand.
An Australian man has appeared in court. 28-year-old Brenton Tarrant wasn't on any security watch list. He didn't enter a plea and is due to appear in court next on April the 5th. It's understood that nationals of Bangladesh, India and Indonesia are among the dead. Christchurch has seen tragedy like this before and is still rebuilding from a devastating earthquake just 8 years ago. But nothing quite like this. Then, as now, the rallying cry in many messages of support is a Maori phrase that means stay strong.
So that was the sense of resilience I was speaking about earlier, people feeling that they can move on from this, but still many in shock. I'm now joined by Kim Baker-Wilson, who's a reporter from TVNZ, and he's been reporting on this since the story broke just yesterday. And Kim, you were here at the Law Courts earlier when the suspect was brought.
A very packed scene. Normally the New Zealand public can get into New Zealand courts as a right to go and see people appear, but that wasn't the case today. So high was the risk of security going wrong that the court stopped the public from going in here today. Media, accredited media, were the only ones allowed inside, brought through 6 at a time. When they got through there, Mr. Tarrant appeared in a white boiler suit and bare feet, handcuffed. He appeared to be rocking slightly side to side, only appeared for minutes without a lawyer. And as you were mentioning earlier, he has been remanded in custody without plea after to appear in the High Court next month.
That's right. And we've heard from the Prime Minister several times since this awful tragedy occurred yesterday. Earlier, she was visiting victims in the hospital, speaking to bereaved families as well as members from the Muslim community. What's she been saying?
She came here straight from the capital, Wellington, on an Air Force flight and came with the leader of the opposition and the Deputy Prime Minister also. And she gave them condolences, her condolences, both from herself and from the country. They talked earlier about how people came here to live recently and also so many years ago in many cases, and Christchurch has been welcoming them with open arms, and Christchurch is where so many of them have been injured or lost their lives. So she gave her condolences to the survivors and to the families of those who have lost people, and also gave them assurances that ACC, the Accident Compensation Corporation here in New Zealand, will support people, will support families if the victims have been working here in New Zealand.
Wow. And also, you know, you've come from Auckland to cover this here in Christchurch, and there's a real sense of New Zealand having been very much shaken up by this tragedy. What's the sense, the mood that you feel?
We certainly have been. When we arrived at the airport, there are armed police officers at the airport, which is a sight you just don't see in New Zealand. Behind the camera behind us here now, I can see an armed police officer walking outside the police building, which again is a sight you just don't see in New Zealand. So we're now using words that we've never had to use here before, like terrorism, like massacre. Those are words that we've just never had to use for our New Zealand news before.
All right, well, Kim Baker-Wilson, thank you so much for joining us and telling us your experience of this. Now, of course, a lot of people still really shaken by this, as you heard Kim say. Security as well, very much on alert a day after the fact. Earlier, I was speaking to Christchurch City Councillor Raf Munji, and this is what he had to say.
It's been 24 hours now, and there's a sense of still being stunned that this has happened here in our city, and just trying to get to some sense of what the community needs, what's happening in terms of burials and the proper processes that are needed for the community for that, supporting our medical staff who are still doing an incredible job, and I think just the general community coming to terms with it. I mean, I've just walked past the Botanic Gardens where there's a floral display, and people are very quiet. It's as if people are still in shock over what has happened, and I think as the initial incident wears off, it's going to take a while for people to actually come to terms that this has happened here in Christchurch, in New Zealand.
Right. And in terms of readiness, you said you've been working with your colleagues, and certainly the hospital staff have been inundated as well. There's a real concern, obviously, that with so many people dead, and in Muslim tradition, they have to be buried in 24 hours. Is there a sense that facilities in Christchurch can deal with this?
That is very challenging for us. I've been told it will probably take 4 days to actually dig the appropriate number of graves. So, yeah, that's going to be a problem. So we're going to have to work with the community and find a way through that. And obviously there's a coronial process that needs to be gone through as well. So how that pans out, we don't know. Hopefully tomorrow morning we'll have some more answers, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
And do you feel like you've got enough resources? Are more being sent?
We're pulling in resources from around the country. I mean, the one advantage we've had in a way is having been through the earthquakes. We've been through this. I mean, the medical staff have been through this before. They operate at a very high level. But still, there's resource shortages. So in terms of sextons for the burial services, they need to be brought in. So yeah, we'll be asking for help where we need it.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, it's not the first time Christchurch has faced tragedy. It's had to deal with these awful earthquakes in the past, the last being in 2012, which was devastating for this community. So in comparison, how do you think the community is dealing with this now compared to what's happened prior to this? Is this the same sort of feeling, or is there a sense that actually there's a lot of discomfort and concern around this issue?
I think probably a mixture. I think there's a weariness. I mean, in terms of the earthquake recovery, we had just got to the point where we just reopened our town hall 8 years after the earthquake, a new central city library. Felt like things were getting back to normal. And then for this to happen and for children to be in lockdown at school, so that whole sort of trauma again, parents stuck in their offices or civic buildings, it's kind of reliving that. So the mental health issue, which has already had a long tail from the earthquakes, is of concern. But I think this is not a natural disaster. This is a man-made disaster, a domestic terror attack in our own town. So it's going to be quite difficult for people to actually come to terms with that. And I think as we start to see and learn more names and put faces to those and to bury people, I think it will have a bigger impact on the wider community.
Now, Raf, you were saying that you're part Muslim yourself, and you've lived here in Christchurch for many, many years. So is there a sense that your community is feeling incredibly, uncomfortable, unsafe because of this?
I think now there's probably some concerns, but actually my sense is that the Islamic community still has faith in New Zealand being a safe place. But we have to address some of the issues around radicalisation and the, what has led to this attack. But generally, the communities have felt safe, even as a general increasing tone of Islamophobia globally. I mean, and that has spilled over into New Zealand, there's no doubt about that. But in general, people didn't have a lot of concerns. You'd go to Friday prayers, no one really thought too much about it.
And that was Christchurch City Councillor Raf Manji speaking to me earlier. Now, of course, as you can imagine, it's the day after the fact. Many residents here in Christchurch still very much coming to terms with this. But as you heard there, and as you heard in the report earlier as well, there's a real sense of resilience that people are now able to get through this. It is a city that has endured tragedies like the devastating earthquake about 8 years ago as well. So they're rebuilding, they know they can get past this, but at the moment there's a real sense of, how could this happen in our homes? How could it happen in our community? How could it happen in New Zealand, where such things are just unheard of?
Okay, Sharanjit Lal, thank you very much.
Good evening, Kathy, and good morning from Christchurch. You're right. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister here, her office has confirmed that she had received an email just before the attack warning of its imminence. And this was sent to an email account not personally checked by the Prime Minister, but it was also sent to a number of political figures here, media organisations. It did not spell out specifically what was about to unfold, and it is very unclear what could have actually been done to prevent it had it done so. Now, it turns out that this suspect, the 28-year-old Australian Brenton Tarrant, was on nobody's watch list. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison had said he wasn't on anyone's radar anywhere. And Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister, said he should have been. She actually said this individual should have been someone that the authorities were aware of and proactively focused on. And those are the exact questions that we have asked and that our agencies are focusing on. Now, she has been quite outspoken in the past 24 hours. She has notably, as you'll see in my report, mentioned reform of the firearms laws. She also mentioned a conversation that she'd had with Donald Trump in the wake of the massacre. He'd called it a horrible massacre. And said, what can I do to help? The president had been praised in this manifesto for being a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose. And very pointedly, Jacinda Ardern told him, my message was sympathy and love for all Muslim communities. And as you'll see from what lies behind me here, this accumulating mountain of a wall of flowers which has become a makeshift shrine in Christchurch, that has been the message New Zealanders and their Prime Minister have been sending out.
In what the Maori here call Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, a fog of tearful anguish has descended on the biggest city on South Island. At the Botanic Gardens, resplendent bouquets were reverently laid. Well, after what Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern yesterday called one of New Zealand's darkest days, today, frankly, hasn't been much brighter. There is a visceral sense of raw grief here in Christchurch. A city stunned by the enormity of what has happened here and by the sheer cold-blooded nature of its execution. In their bereavement, the small Muslim community of Christchurch cried, "There is no God but God." The response across New Zealand? Here, there is no place for hate. Yes, this nation's stunned, but probably not shocked that violent white supremacism should have reared its head. It's just that in this peaceful country, small and geographically remote, they really hadn't seen it coming.
It's horrible. It's unbelievable. It's incomprehensible. I just... And today, I even just started to feel a bit angry, How dare someone come here and do this? It's just It's pretty bad. And as Jacinda said, you know, this is not us.
Oh, we've been through the earthquakes, we've been through a lot, like fires, earthquakes, and this is probably the worst thing of everything. Like it's not great at all. It's everyone's probably on edge. It'll change everything for a long, long time.
Can it recover? A murder. The judge ordered his face be blurred to preserve his fair trial rights. Tarrant showed no emotion and appeared to make a white power symbol. We've chosen not to show this. The judge remanded him without a plea. Turkish authorities released a still of the suspect at Istanbul airport in 2016, saying his contacts and movements were being investigated. Tarrant said he'd hatched his plan after visiting Europe. As yet, no one's sure just where he went and who he met there. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern flew in. She'd said her country had probably been targeted because it represented kindness and compassion, offering refuge for those who needed it, a home for those who share its values. She told Muslim leaders she'd come to bring a message of love and support from her grieving compatriots. She also listened to her hosts.
New Zealand is a place that we cherish equally for its inclusiveness, for its diversity. And I will consider it my personal mission as Prime Minister to defend that so long as I have the privilege of holding this office.
Later, at a news conference, Ardern addressed the vexed issue of how the killer could have obtained his lethal arsenal. Enough, she said. The loopholes must be closed.
While work is being done as to the chain of events that led to both the holding of this gun licence and the possession of these weapons, I can tell you one thing right now. Our gun laws will change.
49 dead, 36 remain in hospital, 11 in intensive care. Outside, I met Nazim,